Viewers, we have some live pictures coming in from Italy, which has rolled out the red carpet for Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he wraps up his five-nation diplomatic tour in Rome. And there you can see Modi received a welcome from the Indian diaspora, and this is also the Prime Minister's striking visuals from Italy. There you can see that's the Prime Minister interacting with several top dignitaries of Italy as well as another European nation. And now this is the delegation level talks that were held, bilateral talks that were held. There you can see External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, and we also have Vikram Misri also seated there right next to him. And those were the pictures of the Prime Minister attending a high level meeting with his Italian counterpart. Viewers, that was the ceremonial guard of honor given to the Prime Minister when he arrived for the all-important meeting. But most importantly, it is the warm welcome that the Prime Minister received from the Indian diaspora, because there were cultural performances and even local supporters before he held a high-profile dinner meeting with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. And the two leaders later visited the iconic Colosseum together ahead of formal bilateral talks, which you can see on your screens. Those are formal bilateral talks that are aimed at deepening India-Italy strategic cooperation. And this visit of the Prime Minister is being seen as a key diplomatic push to strengthen ties in trade, defense, clean energy, maritime security and emerging technologies. The Prime Minister is also expected to meet Italian President and review the India-Italy Joint Strategic Action Plan 2025 and 2029. And this is, I think, that engagement that's happening. Kabir is joining me on the phone line. Kabir, if you could describe the visuals that are now beaming onto our channels about this bilateral engagement.
You're absolutely right, Deepak. That is Sergio Mattarella, the president of Italy, sitting right across the Indian Prime Minister, who's, of course, traveling with his own delegation led by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. It has been quite an eventful, a couple of hours for the Prime Minister in Rome with that packet of sweets that was given to the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, and that melody moment that was shared on social media. It's since been going viral, and India and Italy essentially have reaffirmed their essential commitment to deepen bilateral cooperation across various, key sectors, expanding with unprecedented momentum. Take a look at the past couple of years, even at that G20 summit. Every time the Italian Prime Minister visits the Indian Prime Minister or they share a moment, it is a viral moment on social media. Now, there's also a joint article written by the Indian Prime Minister and Giorgia Meloni, Narendra Modi and Giorgia Meloni, penning down this joint article in Rome. The two leaders highlighting that relations between India and Italy have evolved from a cordial friendship, and that friendship has deepened over time as well. That melody moment with that packet of sweets, the one that we here consume back at home in India, has, of course, is at the center of this cordial friendship. But that friendship has now been transformed into a special strategic partnership, right from, guard of honors to those balcony moments in Rome to the visits to the Colosseum, a historic moment inside a place where history was made, essentially. And now, finally, the visuals that we were just seeing, Sergio Mattarella sitting across the Indian Prime Minister. Sergio Mattarella is the president of Italy, and this is a partnership that's now rooted in values of freedom, in values of democracy, as per that article that was written collectively by Giorgia Meloni and her Indian counterpart, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is, mind you, the final leg of the Prime Minister's five-nation tour. Just yesterday, it was the India-Nordic ties that were, in focus and in highlight. The Prime Minister has been conferred with the highest civilian honors of many of these countries as well. The list goes beyond, just 32, 33 awards. And both these leaders have collectively noted, just like these visuals tell us, these balcony moments. Of course, this is made for optics, but diplomatic ties is something that has strengthened these optics as well. The leaders have noted that at a time when the global order, which is undergoing a profound churn and change, the India-Italy partnership is being guided by regular exchanges. Mind you, India has been very vocal when it comes to the West Asian crisis, when it comes to the Palestinian issue. Very recently, we backed the two-nation, the two-state theory And Italy has also been, hitting back at the NATO alliance. It's been hitting back at, how the European Union wants to command affairs when it comes to Donald Trump trying to dictate things in the Strait of Hormuz, and the European Union, taking their own stand. So right from the Melodi moment to this bilateral with Sergio Mattarella, India playing its cards right, and this cordial friendship now transforming into a profound but very important strategic partnership, Deepak.
Right, Kabir, and how important is this, joint strategic action plan 2025 to 2029 as far as elevating India-Italy ties beyond symbolism, Kabir?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot is being set in motion. It's not just this. The India-Middle East economic, corridor is also an important piece of this. There's a project aimed at improving trade links between India, the Gulf, and the Europe, and then Italy is going to play its important part over there. So, not just reinforcing diplomatic and trade ties during this particular visit. It's also going to look at several other aspects like trade. We're looking at defense as well. We're looking at, diplomatic cooperation. Like other European countries, Italy, beg your pardon, has looked to India as an ally, and it's an important thing. Look at the mother of all deals that we've just signed just a couple of months back with the European Union. And the European Union, they concluded that long-delayed trade deal with India, which is why Italy is also, crucially an equal partner in that particular motive. And Prime Minister Modi's trip, which is, by the way, his first bilateral visit to Italy, which is why you see all the, the balcony visits, the Colosseum visits, the grandiose and the grandeur with which this bilateral is being, carried out. This is happening following his attendance at a G7 summit. This took place in 2024, about 2 years back, and then a G20 gathering 3 years earlier. And Giorgia Meloni is now meeting the Prime Minister only for the fourth time after that. So, this is crucial. This is quite significant. The IMEC corridor, the India-Middle Eastern Economic Corridor that I was talking about, based on a memorandum that's been signed back in 2023 at the G20, which was hosted by India, between partners including the European Union, United States, mind you, with Joe Biden. That is a project to develop trade routes connecting India to the Arabian Gulf and the Arabian Gulf with Europe, and that's where Italy and its ports are going to be playing a major, part. When we're focusing on boosting of trade between 2025 and 2029, like you mentioned, Deepak, the two leaders have essentially adopted a declaration. This declaration is going to focus on strengthening the partnership, including annual heads of governments and the summits between these two countries that are going to take place. Both these nations, India and Italy, are targeting, at least 20 billion euros. That's $23.2 billion in bilateral trade by the year 2029. That's essentially on the anvil. That's on the cards. And bilateral trade has totaled more than 14 billion euros in 2023. This is, as per the data that's actually available, and by 2029, in about 6 more years, this is going to turn out to be $23.2 billion. So from 14 to $23 billion. That's the trade value that's on the anvil, and this is besides the EU trade pact that's already in motion. The G20 members that had established back in 2023 under India's presidency and under India's, hosting of the event, they've already expanded the cooperation in sectors like scientific research, like artificial intelligence, which is booming in today's time, and the trade numbers that we just highlighted. So Modi and Meloni, as our branding also says, Modi meets Meloni, is going to be, there's going to be a working lunch. There's going to be a lot of optics at play. There's going to be a lot of viral moments. There's going to be an amalgamation of both of these cultures, and the exchange of views and strengthening economic, trade, and investment cooperation is going to happen on the sidelines. But what's important is that the world can't have enough of these two leaders. Many would suggest that these are, low-key romantic moments, but this is a diplomatic and geopolitical churn with massive things happening in West Asia, with, Donald Trump's consistent threats to Iran. You don't know what's going to happen on that front. Italy has been able to take a stand. It's been able to show strength to the United Kingdom, to the European Union, and tell them that, look, we have our own culture, we have our own priorities to protect and sustain. So how about we go about on that particular front? And that's where India and Italy are joining hands together. Look at these visuals as well. You've got some Italian, music artists who are, playing the Indian cultural music. And the visit to the Colosseum is, again, like I mentioned, a moment of history inside a place where a lot of history has already taken
But
place.
Kabir, looking at these big ticket deals and the IMEC that you just spoke about, it seems like, both the countries are trying to reduce their over dependence on vulnerable supply chains.
That's the IMEC corridor is essentially placed on the foundation that we do not need to, be heavily dependent on, let's say, the Silk Route. We do not need to be heavily dependent. And at a time like this, when we've already seen that the global oil choke points, just like the Strait of Hormuz, just like the Bab el-Mandab Strait, one little untoward incident, a little bit of a misadventure by any of those countries, and, the countries that depend on, import of, a lot of oil, they're absolutely stranded. So in that kind of a situation, the IMEC corridor comes as a, shining beacon of, support to these nations to, like you pointed out, Deepak, not be overly dependent on any of these, trade setups. This is something that we decided. It has India right at the beginning. India, a Middle Eastern economic corridor, and India playing one part, because India is a huge market for not just the European Union, but for both the Americas and vice versa as well. Look at how much of trade we do with the Gulf, which is why the Prime Minister made a visit to the UAE as well. So dependence and vulnerability are two aspects that we're trying to hit, and India has been able to hit two birds with one stone there, Deepak.